August 1945. Okinawa, a temporary American mess hall. Near the ruins of Naha, 28-year-old Yuki Tanaka sat frozen on a wooden bench, her hands pressed firmly against her thighs. Before her, on a dented metal tray, sat something she had never seen in her entire life. A large, flat circle, golden brown crust, bubbling white substance melting across its surface. Strange red sauce visible beneath. Small round discs of meat scattered across the top. Steam rose from this alien creation, carrying an aroma that was completely foreign, not unpleasant, but utterly confusing. An American soldier stood at the end of the table, grinning broadly. He gestured with his hands, mimicking the motion of picking something up and bringing it to his mouth. No chopsticks, no utensils, just hands. Yuki's hands remained frozen at her sides. In Japan, eating with your hands was for small children who hadn't yet learned manners. It was for the uncivilized, for peasants, for animals. She glanced around at the 15 other Japanese women sitting nearby, nurses, factory workers, civilians captured during the final brutal battles of Okinawa. Every single one wore the same expression, complete and utter confusion. Eat with our hands? Yuki whispered to the elderly woman beside her, her voice barely audible. What happened next would become a memory these women would carry for the rest of their lives. The moment they learned that sometimes the things that seem most undignified can carry the greatest dignity of all. To understand what brought Yuki Tanaka to that mess hall table, we need go back 3 weeks earlier. August 15th, 1945. Emperor Hirohito's voice crackled through radios across Japan, announcing the unthinkable: surrender. For Yuki and millions of other Japanese, the world as they knew it collapsed in that single moment. Yuki had spent 3 years serving as a nurse in military field hospitals. She had held the hands of dying soldiers. She had watched young men, boys, really, take their last breaths while calling for their mothers. She had seen the worst of war. But nothing had prepared her for capture. On August 22nd, American forces discovered the cave hospital where Yuki and 46 other women had been hiding with wounded soldiers. They expected to die. Japanese propaganda had taught them that Americans were barbarians who tortured prisoners, violated women, and committed unspeakable atrocities. If captured by the enemy, die with honor, her mother had written in her final letter. Death is preferable to American hands. But death didn't come. Instead, the American soldiers gave them water. They treated their wounds. They spoke in soft voices and gestured gently, even though no one could understand the words. The women were transported to a processing facility near Naha, not in chains, but in covered trucks. They were given clean clothes, medical examinations, and real food. Yuki couldn't understand it. Where was the cruelty? Where was the torture? Where were the monsters she'd been warned about? Among the American officers was Captain James Miller, a 31-year-old from Chicago who ran the women's section of the POW Processing Center. Beside him worked Sergeant Tony Russo, a 24-year-old Italian-American from Brooklyn, New York, assigned to mess hall duty. These two men, one a captain, one a sergeant, would soon change everything these women believed about their captors. And it would all happen because of a strange flatbread with cheese on top. For now, though, the women simply waited, confused, terrified, certain that the kindness was temporary, that something terrible was coming. They had no idea that what was coming wasn't terrible at all. It was pizza. The first week in American custody was a constant state of confused terror. Every morning, Yuki woke up expecting that day to be the day the cruelty finally began. Every night, she fell asleep, wondering why it hadn't. The women were housed in a clean wooden barack. They slept on real cots with thin, but actual mattresses. They were given 3 meals a day, sometimes rice, sometimes strange American foods they didn't recognize, but always enough. None of it made sense. "They're fattening us up," whispered Haruko Sato, a 35-year-old mother too, who had been separated from her children during the chaos of surrender, like pigs before slaughter. "Or softening us for interrogation," added another woman. "The torture will come. It always comes." But the torture never came. Instead, on September 1st, 1945. Captain Miller entered their barrack with a Japanese translator. The women immediately stood, heads bowed, hands clasped in front of them, the posture of submission they'd been taught. Tomorrow, the translator announced, you will eat with American soldiers. In the main mess hall, it will be a cultural exchange. American food. The women exchanged terrified glances. American food? What did that mean? Would they be forced to eat meat raw like barbarians? Would they have to consume something forbidden, something designed to humiliate them? That night, no one slept. In the darkness, whispered conversations filled the barrack. Whatever they serve, we must refuse politely, Haruko said firmly. We cannot abandon our dignity. But what if they force us? Young Michiko Yamamoto asked. She was only 22, the youngest among them, a former factory worker with wide, frightened eyes. Then we endure, Yuki answered, though her voice wavered. We maintain our honor. Even in captivity, we are still Japanese. The morning of September 2nd, 1945, the very same day that Japan's formal surrender was being signed aboard the USS Missouri in Tokyo Bay. The women were escorted toward the mess hall. Yuki's hands trembled at her sides. The smell hit them before they even entered. Something foreign, overwhelming, completely unrecognizable, warm, savory, unlike anything in Japanese cuisine, not unpleasant, but utterly, completely alien. Yuki looked down at her hands, the same hands that held dying soldiers, that had surrendered to the enemy, that now hung uselessly at her sides. She had no idea that in just a few minutes, those hands would be holding something that would change her understanding of humanity forever. The mess hall was chaotic. At least, that's how it appeared to Yuki's Japanese eyes. American soldiers sat at long wooden tables, eating loudly, talking with their mouths full, laughing boisterously. Some had their elbows on the table. Others reached across each other to grab food. There was no order, no formality, no silence. It was the opposite of everything Yuki had been taught about proper dining. And then she saw the food, large, flat circles on metal trays, golden brown, covered in melted white substance, red sauce, strange round meat pieces, no rice, no fish, no miso, no chopsticks anywhere in sight. What is that? Haruko whispered, horror in her voice. Sergeant Tony Russo approached their group with a massive grin. He was young, energetic, with dark curly hair and an enthusiasm that seemed almost aggressive to the reserved Japanese women. Through the translator, he announced, Ladies, today, you're going to try the greatest food in the world. Pizza, straight from my Nana's recipe back in Brooklyn. Pizza, the word meant nothing to them. Russo picked up a triangular slice with his bare hands. The woman gasped audibly as cheese stretched from the trader's mouth. He took an enormous bite. Delizioso, he exclaimed, sauce at the corner of his lips. He gestured for them to do the same. The women stood paralyzed. Eat with their hands? Like animals? Like children? Pick up food with their bare fingers and shove it into their mouths? Impossible. Unthinkable. Barbaric. But then something unexpected happened. Young Michiko, the 22-year-old factory worker, the youngest and perhaps the bravest among them, slowly extended her trembling hand. The room seemed to hold its breath. Her fingers touched the warm crust. She lifted a small slice, cheese dripping. She brought it to her lips. She took a tiny, tentative bite. The entire mess hall went silent, American soldiers and Japanese women alike, all watching this young woman's face. Michiko chewed slowly. Her eyes widened. Something shifted in her expression. And then, impossibly, unbelievably, she smiled. Oishi, she whispered. Delicious. The dam broke. One by one, the other women reached out, tentative hands becoming braver, fingers touching warm dough, cheese stretching, sauce dripping. The first giggles emerged as cheese refused to separate from the main pizza. American soldiers cheered encouragingly. That's it. You got it, ma'am. Yuki was the last to reach. She watched all the others, still resistant, still clinging to her sense of propriety. Finally, her hand moved. The pizza was warm, soft. The cheese slightly burned her fingertips. She took a bite. Flavors exploded. Tomato, cheese, bread, herbs, nothing she'd ever experienced. Rich, comforting, overwhelming. Tears began streaming down her face. Sergeant Russo walked over, concerned. Through the translator, he said softly, "In my family, we eat with our hands because food is love. You don't need barriers between yourself and love." Yuki looked at her hands, covered in sauce and cheese. Hands that had surrendered. Hands that had expected death. Now they were holding life. Something inside her, something that had been frozen since capture, finally began to thaw. That night, the women couldn't stop talking. For the first time since their capture, for the first time in months, really, there was laughter in the barack. Did you see how the cheese stretched? My fingers still smell like that sauce. Michiko, you were so brave. You ate it first. I thought Haruko was going to faint when the American took that huge bite. The pizza dinner became a turning point. In the following weeks, pizza became a weekly occurrence. The women began requesting it specifically, using the few English words they'd learned. Pizza, please. More cheese. Sergeant Russo became an unlikely favorite among the prisoners. He taught them about other American hand foods, sandwiches, hamburgers, hot dogs. Each new food brought new confusion, laughter, and a new connection. And the cultural exchange went both ways. The Japanese women insisted on teaching the Americans to use chopsticks. Watching burly soldiers from Texas and Ohio struggle to pick up a single grain of rice became a source of endless entertainment. No, like this. Fingers here. Laughter echoed across the mess hall. Laughter that would have been unimaginable just weeks before. Yuki found herself looking forward to meals. Not just for the food, but for the connection. Hands that had been enemies were now breaking bread together. Sharing tables. Sharing jokes across the language barrier. On September 15th, Yuki wrote in her diary, "Today I ate with my hands again. I no longer feel shame. I feel human. The American sergeant was right. Food is love, and love doesn't need chopsticks." Haruko, the mother of two, finally gathered the courage to ask Captain Miller if she could send a message to her children in Osaka. She expected rejection. Instead, the captain personally arranged for the communication. 3 days later, Haruko received confirmation. Her children were alive. They were safe with relatives. She fell to her knees and grasped Captain Miller's hands, weeping, not in surrender this time, in gratitude. Hands that had once represented the enemy now represented salvation. By October 1945, repatriation began. The women prepared to return to a Japan forever changed by war. On the day of departure, Sergeant Russo approached Yuki with a folded piece of paper. It was his grandmother's pizza recipe, translated into broken Japanese by the camp translator. "Make this in Japan," he said through the translator. "And remember that hands can hold more than weapons. They can hold love." 40 years later, in 1985, Yuki Tanaka sat in her small Tokyo apartment, surrounded by grandchildren. She was 68 years old. Her hair had turned silver. Her hands, once steady enough to assist in surgeries, now trembled slightly with age. But they still knew how to make pizza. In an interview for a Japanese documentary about women POWs, she was asked about her memories of American captivity. She paused for a long moment, then smiled. "People ask me about the war, about the bombing, about fear. And yes, those memories are painful." She looked down at her weathered hands. "But when I think about September 2nd, 1945, I don't think about surrender. I think about pizza. I think about a young Italian boy from Brooklyn who taught me that eating with your hands isn't uncivilized. It's intimate. It's human." She held up the yellowed recipe, preserved for 4 decades. "That day, I didn't just taste pizza. I tasted the possibility that people we call enemies can become the hands that feed us. Sometimes the most powerful moments in history aren't battles or treaties. They're shared meals, stretched cheese, and sauce on fingers. And the hands we fear most can become the hands that heal us." If this story touched you, please like and subscribe for more untold stories from history. And remember, kindness, even in the smallest moments, even in a slice of pizza, is never wasted.